Haberlercom'dan herkese sevgiler. Bugün stüdyomuzda çok önemli bir konuğumuz var. Eski Lübnan Başbakanı Hassan Diab bizlerle birlikte. Haberlercom ekibinden Behiye Teymur bize bu röportajda yardımcı olacak. Birlikte sorular yönelteceğiz. Behiye Hanım, siz de hoş geldiniz yayınımıza. Welcome.
Pleasure.
Mr. President, first of all, welcome to Istanbul and welcome to Haberler.com studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
My first question is, how did you end up being appointed as Prime Minister? What is a surprise for you during that time?
Well, it was a surprise indeed, because I didn't expect it, nor did I seek to become Prime Minister. I'm an academician for 33 years and, a politician maybe for less than 5 years, 3 years as Minister of Higher Education and just under 2 years as Prime Minister. So how did this come about? Well, it's a long story. I'll try to summarize it. When I was asked to become Minister of Education and Higher Education, of course, I was Vice President of the American University of Beirut. I'm a professor of computer engineering. And the Prime Minister at the time wanted a technocrat Minister of Higher Education. So I agreed to do the task because I wanted to serve my country. So during that period, about 3 years, we really did a lot of work and a lot of accomplishments to the ministry in 3 different aspects. Education, we have about 3,000 public and private schools in Lebanon, as well as higher education, we have about 60 higher education institutions, as well as vocational technical education, we have something like 200 institutions. And we did many things for the first time as well. I'm not going to talk about the achievements, but I will refer to one thing. Every year they hold the WEF, which is the World Economic Forum in Davos. And in that event, they rank countries in different sectors across the world. So in December 2013, which means 2.5 years after I was Minister of Education, Higher Education, WEF ranked Lebanon in the higher education sector. I will mention 3 things. The quality of schools of businesses and universities, Lebanon ranked 13 out of 144. Quality assurance in higher education, Lebanon ranked 10 out of 144. And quality of teaching science and math in higher education, Lebanon ranked 4 out of 144. We were preceded at the time, as I recall, by Singapore, Finland, and Belgium. And actually, the report is still on the internet, the December 2013 WEF report. So this is just a sample of how much we have achieved during that time, hundreds of new decrees, new laws. We had a new higher education law and so on. So when I left and handed over the ministry in February 2014, from 2014 until 2019, there were many journalists and politicians that were saying, well, here is a success because, in Lebanon, it takes so long to appoint a prime minister. And then when they choose a prime minister, it takes so long to form a government. Everything takes so much because of the political feuds in the country. So during that time, from 2014 to 2019, on many occasions on TV, in interviews with politicians, some politicians and some journalists that I didn't know at the time, they used to promote my name. Why not him? We tried him as a minister. He was successful. He did so great. Why not him, as prime minister? Of course, I used to ignore it because I didn't want that. However, in October 2019, the 17 October Revolution started requesting a technocrat cabinet. And they started requesting, hundreds of thousands of people, families. It was a true revolution the first few months. Then it was kidnapped by some political parties, by bigger NGOs, by some of the foreign embassies. But at the beginning, everybody thought it was a revolution in the beginning, which was the result of decades of unfairness to the people. So when this happened on October 17, 2019, it was a different story. So again, my name was in the media again. I ignored it. Actually, I was outside the country. I was outside the country for a month. I came back early December. So the president at the time, President On, asked to meet me on December 16, the first time. And he said, I would like you to be the next prime minister. And my reaction was, being somebody that is a technocrat, academic, and independent person that does not belong to any political party, it has to be a technocrat cabinet, which is what the revolution is asking for anyway. And then I left without any confirmation. So on December 2019, a day before I became prime minister-elect, he called me again. and he confirmed that he is supporting me to do a technocrat cabinet. And December 19, I became. So as a result, I was able to form a cabinet in 33 days, which is a record time in Lebanese history, in Lebanese politics. Usually it takes, the government after me took 13 months so this is how I became, because I felt I wanted to serve my country, and I was put on the spot, but I never seeked it.
So you can say your success in the Ministry of Education, it's brought your name forefront in the Prime Ministry?
It certainly played a proactive role, but also I think the fact that there was a revolution, the fact that all the political parties were in a difficult situation, and the fact that the revolution was specifically asking for a prime minister that is independent, not just technocrat.
Also, how did your academic background, including your time as a university president, shape you as a leader?
Well, it certainly played a role because, as an academic, as a technocrat, when we make decisions, at least when I make decisions, it involves analysis, synthesis, planning. It involves looking at the problem in detail. In my case, of course, I had advisors in different technical areas of expertise. So I had advisors in the economic sector, in the finance sector, in the banking sector, social sector, and so on. An academic in a position like this as a prime minister, especially that he is independent, would make the best decision that has the most effect from a national perspective, which is typically not what usually happens. Because what usually happens is that decisions are made from a political perspective, from a sectarian perspective, from a religious perspective, from a perspective that has to do with a city or an area or a group of people. Okay, so all my decisions were based on a question that I always used to ask: is this the best decision for Lebanon, for the Lebanese society, not for a group or for a sect or for a political party and so on. This is the difference between somebody that is technocrat independent and somebody that is political, that is part of a political party.
At that time, it was very bad economic situation and you took on that burden.
Yeah. So everybody knew that the economic situation was in turmoil because, the economic situation was bad from decades ago. So if we go back to 98, there was a very wrong decision taken in the parliament to start getting debts in dollars, not in Lebanese. Before it, all our national debt was in Lebanese, something that we can print. From 98 onwards, we started, getting loans in dollars.
Yeah.
And this was a very wrong decision, in my personal opinion. And there were many parliamentarians that were against it. Then in 2000, between 2000 and 2005, there was Paris 1 and Paris 2, which allowed the international community, France and other countries, to support Lebanon through billions of dollars to help the economy. But the way it spent, nobody knows how this benefited the country. Then you had a very clear red sign in 2011, which is when the balance of payments of the country for the first time went negative. It was minus $2.5 billion, which means the influx of cash is less, of dollars, into the country is less than amount of cash leaving the country. And if you look, and this continued until 2019, it reached as much as 6 and 7 and 8 billion some of the years. So between 2011 and 2019, something like $30 billion of cash left the country, which means we're from National Reserve that are in the central bank. The National Reserve in the central bank, this money is basically the money from the banks, which means the money of the people. So yes, we had clear signs that the economic problem was bad. But I assumed, being a technocrat and being independent, that when I became prime minister, that at least all the political parties that are in feud would join together forces, at least to solve the economic problem, the banking problem, the financial problem, because it's of benefit to everybody, But I was wrong. The problems increased between the political parties, between the parliamentarians. There was more vertical division and everything almost stopped. Lebanon paid the price as a result. Of course, when I became prime minister, the picture was much darker. The problems that I saw is that it was much worse than what I think it was.
I remember that during your time as a prime minister, Lebanon was without a government for almost a year. It took about a year when the previous cabinet resigned until you formed your government?
No, this is not accurate. It was the cabinet after. Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri resigned, I think, towards the end of October, after the revolution, about 10 days, 27 October. The revolution started in 17 October. He resigned 10 days later in 2019. And then I was Prime Minister-elect on 19 December, so only 2 months. What you're referring to, I think, is when I resigned, I stayed in caretaking mode as caretaking Prime Minister for 13 months, which is the longest period as a caretaker Prime Minister in the history of Lebanon at the time. And during the worst conditions, financial and economic and social conditions at the time. So yes, it was, no, in my case, I was relatively quickly assigned as elect Prime Minister, and within 33 days, I formed a cabinet. It was born on 21 January 2020. 33 days exactly, which is a record time.
You have summarized your experience for us, Mr. President, and I thank you for that. While all of this was happening, what was your greatest fear? Because it wasn't just the economic crisis. Even the COVID-19 pandemic hit the country and everything got even worse.
It's no, I don't get afraid. So yes, I was threatened. I was under a lot of pressure. But once I decide on embarking on a task, I don't stop, you know. So, and they knew eventually that they cannot stop me. So no, I was not afraid, but I was worried about the country, because the country was in such a bad economic state that it needed, you know, all the political parties to be one hand to solve these issues, you know, to solve the economic problem and to solve the financial problem, the banking sector problem, things that have the problems that we reached as a result of the accumulation of mismanagement for 3 decades. So as it turned out, the number of crises and disasters that hit Lebanon during my 6-month period, I was Prime Minister for 6 months. Then I was caretaker Prime Minister for 13 months. So for the 6-month period, from the moment we received the parliamentary vote of confidence on February 11, 2020, until I resigned in August 10, 2020, that's 6 months. During these 6 months, every single disaster that usually hit Lebanon over 50 years hit Lebanon during those 6 months. And on top of that, as you mentioned, COVID-19 came, which hit the whole planet, the world. And it hit us at a time when we were financially broke and we were economically in a very bad state. Nevertheless, I think there was an article in Washington Post, or I don't remember which journal or which paper, but it was during May 2020 that, you know, because the COVID problem was huge in the US and there was a lot of conflict and so on. So they said the US can learn a thing or two from small countries such as Lebanon regarding how to deal with COVID-19, because we reached in May zero new cases. But then after that, people didn't listen to the government. Exactly. Yeah. And then the numbers started increasing, but we were lucky to be among the first in the Middle East to secure the vaccines ahead of time, to order them ahead of time, and that helped a lot to sort of stabilize things. But yes, I mean, it was multifaceted problems and disasters. You had economic problem, you had the banking system collapse, you had financial problem, you had the social problem, and of course, this all relates to the security problem, not to mention the health problem resulting from COVID-19.
Among all these problems, which one was the most challenging for you?
Well, there were a lot of challenges, but I would say if I want to choose one of them as the top challenge, it would be the decision to stop payment for the Eurobonds. Our national debt when I took over was about $93 billion. 2/3 of that was in Lebanese pounds, and 1/3, about $31 billion, was in Eurobonds, meaning foreign currency in dollars. So we reached a point in March where we had a payment of $1.2 billion on 9th of March. And during February, remember, we took the vote of confidence on 11th of February. So immediately we were facing, this issue. In 2 weeks' time, we have to pay 1.2 billion regarding the Eurobond. So I asked my advisors, is this the only payment? It turned out that there are several payments in 2020 amounting 4.5 billion. Another similar in 2021, 4.5 billion. So that's 9+ billion in 2 years. And if you look at 2022, another 4+ billion. So you're talking about over $12 billion in 3 years. And when I asked the governor of the central bank how much reserves we have in the central bank, he said less than 22 billion. So I said, there's no way we can pay, because we were using some of this money to support people for corn, for the bread, for medication, COVID-19, and so on. So I met with the owners which are some of the banks, as well as the central bank. Central bank had $5.4 billion of that share. And I told them there are 3 options. One of them, to pay, I cannot pay for the reasons I explained. Secondly, to stop payment altogether, which I don't want and you don't want. But there's a third option, which is rescheduling of payments. So you take those 3 years, 12 billion pounds, and throw them 20 years ahead. And then you can relax the payment schedule, so to speak, for the next 3 years at least, during which time you can put an economic recovery plan to put the country back on the right track. And in order to make this decision, the shareholders that have to make this decision must have 75% of the shares. And I asked them, they said, we have 75% of shares between the central bank and the bankers and 2 US companies, Ashmore and Fidelity. So I told them then, please, that was around mid-February 2020. So don't sell, so that you still are able to make this decision. And in early March, I will declare the decision of rescheduling. Everybody's happy. Early March, I found out they sold. We no longer have the 70, or they don't have the 75%. So basically, they told me something and they did something else. Even if they want to, they can no longer make that decision, because it went down from 75 to 60%. And the only other option was to pay. And today, we still have $9 billion in the reserves of the central bank because of that decision. Had I paid in 2020 and 2021, early 2022, we would have had 0 reserves, which means the Lebanese pound would have gone to $1 million per dollar.
I remember when you announced that you could not pay your debt, it was a breaking news all around the world.
This decision should have been made 5 years ago, before I did, and 10 years before, because there were signs. I told you about the red lights and the signs, but nobody had the courage. But it was necessary.
What did you think about the protest made against you?
Well, I don't mind criticism. I think constructive criticism is good. I support it, and I think sometimes when you hear constructive criticism, it might help you correct things. As an academician, we are used to hear constructive criticism on many issues. I don't think this is a problem at all. When you want to hear the opinions of experts and advisors, you want them to tell you the truth. And sometimes they have to criticize opinions of others or of the cabinet. So I'm not against that at all. But the problem is when it's not a constructive criticism, when the criticism is emanating from political reasons to sectarian reasons to whatever. I mean, look, I will tell you about a book that was published less than a year ago, a few months ago, in Lebanon by a famous journalist with facts, data, and so on. I'll give you the conclusion. He is saying, not just him, there was another study and a third research study, all concluding the same thing, that during 2011 to 2020, when I was Prime Minister, during that time, $1.2 billion was spent on journalists and on TV stations so that politicians and businessmen can control what they say and what they do and when they say it. So this is not unusual in many countries, but I mean, the extent of it in a small country like Lebanon is a lot. So a lot of criticism took place, which either fake news or bending the truth or doing it for political reasons. And I saw that from day one. From the first day I became Prime Minister-elect. You know, you don't criticize a prime minister-elect because you haven't seen anything yet. You know, he hasn't even formed his cabinet. He hasn't even gotten the parliament approval or confidence. They haven't made decisions. There's no cabinet yet. So that that proves more that a lot of the criticism is intended just to hurt and to smear the personality. And this is something definitely I'm against.
In 2020, unfortunately, there was a terrible incident in the Beirut port. A fertilizer warehouse exploded. This explosion is considered one of the largest non-nuclear explosion in the history. Can you talk about it? What happened? What was your first reaction when you heard about it?
Yeah, I didn't hear about it. I knew it happened because I was in the Grand Serai, and it pushed me, the explosion pressure pushed me. But this disaster is probably one of the worst disasters that hit Lebanon, and it took part of my soul and part of the soul of Beirut and part of the soul of the country. It was a true disaster because of the immensity of the explosion, the number of people that died, the number of martyrs that died, and the number of people that were injured, the damage to the area, to the houses. It was a terrible, and any prime minister in any country would have to resign in such a situation. So I resigned in 5 days' time after the disaster took place, and I can tell you what happened if you want.
Of course, we would like to hear about that. But there was one thing still stuck in my mind about the day. The flag, Lebanese flag in your office fell because of the explosion, and you bent down by your hand and pick it up. This video was shared a lot on social media. It was so touching and touched the people hard.
Well, it was, as I said, a big disaster, and the whole of Beirut area was destroyed, and the Serai where I was, the Serai Palace was also destroyed. Everything was falling apart. And it was a big disaster, and I immediately called the president of the republic, President Aoun, and I told him we should have immediately a meeting of the Higher Council of Defense, which he chairs. And we did in the presidential palace. And I told them then that I'm going to form a ministerial committee, not a judicial committee. We have nothing to do with the justice. There's separation between the judicial and the government. I decided to form a committee of ministers, not of judges, in order to consider the final decisions that we have to make before I resign on the 10th of August, 5 days later. Because there are a lot of decisions that have to be taken in cabinet, in the government. You cannot do it if you resign. After you resign, you cannot do it. And the decrees have to be done before you resign. And all of these 14 decisions had to do with martyrs, with families of the victims, with cost of the repair, everything to do with the explosion, one way or the other. And also to gather all information from the security forces and send it to the judicial system, which we did. So we did all of that in 5 days. And on August 10th, we had the last cabinet meeting, approved these decisions, and then I resigned after that in the evening of 10th.
Yeah. Before the explosion, was your government ever warned or informed about the risk of in Beirut port?
Look, there's a lot of false information surrounding this issue. I am one, like the families of the victims and the martyrs, I am with them to know the truth, the absolute truth, not to politicize this like everything is done in Lebanon. So what happened regarding this issue is that the moment I received an official letter, I informed concerned ministers. That was on the 21st of July, I think, which is about 2 weeks before the explosion. With our new constitution, after the Ta'if agreement, which ended the civil war in 1990, the minister becomes the master of his ministry. Any decree that has to be signed by the prime minister regarding a certain ministry has to be signed by the minister himself. Otherwise, it will not pass. So I automatically, the moment I received the letter, automatically sent the letter to the two ministers that were concerned, Minister of Justice and the Minister of Public Works. According to the letter report I received, they're both involved.
It was one time exactly?
21st of July, 2 weeks before the explosion.
2 weeks before
yeah.
explosion.
How
many months after your administration?
About 5.5 months after my cabinet got the vote of confidence. So as a result, I sent a request to both ministers to let me know what they have as far as information and what should be done. However, during those 2 weeks, there was only one working day because we were closed. There were 2 weekends and we were closed for COVID for a week. and we had the army vacation, many things. There's only one working day. So the first day that the ministers were, and anyway, some of them were outside the country. The first day they started working on the file, the explosion happened. The question is, some people, including the security, including the army, including judges, including internal security, national security, ministers, they knew about that from 2013. The Higher Council of Defense, they all knew about it from 2013. Why didn't they do anything about it? The question is not why you didn't do anything about it the last 2 weeks, which I did. The moment I received something, I automatically requested the feedback and the opinion of the minister, what should be done. But the question is, what did they do for 7 years about it? Why did they leave it there for 7 years? Anyway, it's against the law to offload this material onto the port grounds, but it happened. So there are a lot of questions, and actually I was called by the French president, and he asked me when should I come, and I said immediately. So when he came, we went to the presidential palace, and my speech directed to him a question. I said, Mr. President, we would like to have the videos of the explosion before, after, and during the explosion, so that we can see what happened, because it was a clear day, it was still light, it was about 6:05 p.m.
Yeah.
And of course, we received nothing. And there were 500 satellites over the area. Today, they see the ant in Gaza, and they see, a cat in Beirut from the satellites. So it's obviously there are a lot of hidden information that we don't know of, that only the judges can answer.
What exactly happened? What are your guesses?
This disaster, unprecedented disaster in Lebanon, the explosion in the port area, for me, it killed part of my soul. Not only because I love Lebanon and I love Beirut, and I don't want any of the Lebanese to be hurt, but also because we don't deserve this. I mean, if it's a mistake, which I doubt is a mistake, but it shouldn't have happened, because there are strict rules regarding not allowing explosive materials to be unloaded into the port. It's part of the constitution, part of the bylaws in Lebanon. So why the judge allowed this to happen, I don't know. Anyway, the ship was going to Mozambique, as I remember, from Georgia to Mozambique. How it turned out to come to Lebanon, I don't understand. And then got stuck in Lebanon, and then was under the sea in Lebanon after unloading the material. I don't understand. And even if you unload it, why didn't they get rid of the material for 7 years? There's too many questions that really, but the main question is, all experts say that only 500 tons exploded. So what about the difference, the 2,250 tons? Where did these disappear? There are a lot of strange questions that we didn't get the answer of. And is it a missile? Because Trump, in the same night after the explosion, the same night, went out on CNN and said, my generals informed me that this is an attack on Beirut port. Attack what? With a missile.
After your duty ended, you turned to civilian life. What are you doing now? How are your days going?
So it's, I'm sure for anybody stepping down from the position of prime minister, it's not easy to adjust to a new life. The first year or the first period after I stepped down, it was reflection on everything that happened before. I was writing my notes, I was writing my memoir, and so on. Also, over the past 2 years, I got many offers to work outside Lebanon. But because I love Lebanon, I want to stay in Lebanon, and I want to live in Lebanon. I don't want to leave to work on a full-time job somewhere else. So I'm on some boards, and I'm on some helping organizations that involve traveling and coming back, but not leaving full-time to stay abroad. So I fill my day, I meet with friends, I write notes, I read politics, I do research. I fill my day with all sorts of tasks.
You said you take notes. Do you have a plan to write a book?
Well, a book has already been written by a journalist on the period when I was prime minister. Another book is being written about Hassan Diab and the truth, which will talk about everything from the moment I became prime minister-elect until I resigned, actually up till now. So this is in the works, but this got delayed because of the war and the situation and the security situation in the country.
What message would you like to share with Lebanese people during this difficult time?
Well, I would say the Lebanese are very educated people, very cultured people. The Lebanese are entrepreneurs, they are innovators, but most importantly, I think, in my opinion, the Lebanese are resilient. They are resilient to difficult situations. I mean, let's not just talk about the last 3 months, which is the war that took place in Lebanon with our enemy Israel. Let's even look back at 1975 when the civil war started, and even before that. So for decades and many decades, Lebanon and the Lebanese people have faced huge challenges, social challenges, economic challenges. We don't have electricity for decades. We don't have drinking water for decades. We have a very bad road network. We only have one airport. So many different, even at the political level. I would say if 5% of these problems are faced by another society in another country, you would see meltdown and collapse. So the Lebanese have learned to be very resilient in enduring and handling the toughest of the toughest situations. And to tell you the truth, I'm proud to be Lebanese, and I think the Lebanese are great people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. What you shared here with us was valuable for our recent history. We also send our love and greetings to the Lebanese people. Thank you.
Bizler de çok teşekkür ediyoruz yayınımıza katıldığınız için. Behiye Hanım, size de teşekkür ediyoruz. Sevgili seyirciler, bir sonraki programımızda görüşmek üzere. Hoşça kalın, bizi takipte kalın.